Good evening and welcome to the Dr. Maria Show. Tonight we're going to take a look back at the events that occurred on April 15th, 2013. It was the 117th Boston Marathon. One of my employed physicians and many other people I knew were running in that particular marathon, along with 23,000 participants represented by 90 countries. Well, one thing you may not know if you're not a New Englander, that the Boston Marathon is always associated with Patriots Day. And what is Patriots Day? It commemorates the Battle of Lexington and Concord, which actually occurred on April 19th, 1775. But through legislation, it was a law in Massachusetts that Patriots Day would be on the third Monday of April. There are also two additional events that happen in Boston on Patriots Day. Of course, as I said, the Boston Marathon, but always our beloved Red Sox plays a game at Fenway Park. For Massachusetts, Connecticut, Maine, and North Dakota, Patriots Day is celebrated on the third Monday of the month in April. But Florida and Wisconsin commemorate Patriots Day on the actual day of the battle, April 19th. Most other states don't even recognize Patriots Day. As usual on that day, spectators line the streets. Whether they know anybody running or not, they love to give encouragement to the runners. At 11:05 a.m., the race begins. And if you're coming to the finish line, you're going to come down Boylston Street. Remarkably, the first person to cross the finish line happened at 12:10 p.m. Lightning. At 2:08, the Red Sox game ends and releases approximately 37,000 people onto the streets. At 2:49 p.m., the first bomb goes off. Everyone is stunned. The vibrations knock over an elderly runner almost near the finish line. People start immediately running towards the carnage to help. 12 seconds later, another bomb explodes only 100 yards away. Just watch this.
The attack appears timed for maximum impact. Just before 2:50 p.m., this is the viewpoint seen by many of the 26,000 marathon runners who are approaching the finish line. The first of the two explosions rocks the sidewalk along the course. White smoke blasting into the air, blowing metal barricades into the street, spewing shrapnel into crowds gathered at the finish. The moment captured from multiple angles just as the race clock approaches the 4-hour and 10-minute mark. Marathon runner Bill Ifrig is knocked to the ground. 12 seconds later, as many flee the scene, a second explosion goes off about 130 yards from the first, less than a block away.
Oh God, get out of the stands! It was very loud. The ground shook. You could just feel it going down through you.
As the injured lay on the pavement, blood staining the ground, emergency medical technicians, Boston police, and some 400 National Guardsmen already on hand for the race immediately triaged the wounded. The event's medical tent was transformed into a trauma unit.
I saw one guy with his legs gone at the knees, some ankles and feet missing, shrapnel wounds on people on the sides of the head.
By 3 p.m., just
carnage everywhere. Instinctually, obviously, police run towards the victim. But as Mayor Giuliani talked about 9/11, out of such tragic times, beautiful human empowerment happens, and a lot of innocent bystanders ran to help people. Many people describe the scene as horrific, with limbs literally strewn about. One iconic photo that lives in my mind involves Carlos Arredondo, Carlos was at the race with his American flag in honor of his sons. His eldest son, Alex, 20, was killed in a sniper attack in Iraq in 2004. Years later, their youngest son, Brian, 24, hung himself on the last day of the Iraq War out of grief. When he heard the bomb go off, he immediately ran to help, and there he found Jeff Bowman, who was bleeding to death after his limbs were blown off. As you can see in this picture, Jeff's color is terrible. He's lost a lot of blood, and all you can see is bones sticking out of his legs. 265 people were injured. 17 people lost their limbs. And sadly, 3 people that day lost their lives. Crystal Campbell, Lou Lindsay, and 8-year-old Martin Richard. Later on, as you'll learn, Sean Collier, an MIT police officer, lost his life. And Dennis Simmons, years later, lost his life from complications from the wounds that occurred during the shootout that will occur a little later on in this story. Through heroic efforts, the Boston Police Department and the FBI combed through volumes of storefront cameras and spectator cell phones. Within days, they had 2 suspects they dubbed White Hat and Black Hat. Just listen to the FBI talk about this process.
At Boston FBI headquarters, in the CART lab, where agents had spent the night searching the chilling video for images of the terrorist.
He was hidden in plain sight. We couldn't see anything that stuck out.
You're tearing your hair out?
Yes, that would be one good way of describing it, yes, but just frustration.
I talked to one of the agents who reviewed the tape, and he said, "You have no idea how many times I had to view the tape to get past the horror, to see who it would be. That took a long time because you were just gripped by that."
This is the man they were looking for but could not spot.
It was very frustrating because we watched it over and over and over again.
Within days, they had their 2 suspects, and they made a decision to release the photos. And soon people started coming forward that they knew who they were. They were brothers, Tamerlan Zarnev and Zokhar Zarnev, both born in Chechnya and with their families emigrated to the United States. On April 18th, 2013, the brothers, after having their photos released, decided they needed to leave Boston. So at 10:31 that night, they ambushed MIT police officer Sean Collier. Unfortunately, they shot him in the head and he died. They did try to take his gun out of his holster, but the holster had an anti-locking device. I had never heard of that, so they were unable to get the gun, thankfully. So they were on the hunt for a car. And Danny Meng pulled over in his Mercedes-Benz around 11 p.m. because he wanted to look at his text messages. And that's when the Zarnev brothers approached the vehicle. The older brother, Tamerlan, jumped into the vehicle and put a gun to Danny's head and told him later that they were the ones responsible for the marathon bombings. They asked Danny, "Does the car have GPS?" And Danny knew enough to lie, and he said no. Well, while they were riding along, the Zarnev brothers said they're heading to New York and they have explosives and they're going to make some additional explosions in Times Squares. Danny knew that this was not a good situation, so as soon as he could, he escaped from the car and he called the police and he gave the police the access code to the GPS. The police were right on it and they were able to track the vehicle, and they got into an open gun battle on the streets of Watertown. The brothers had explosives in the car and were throwing them at the police officers besides shooting at them. Tamerlan was out of his vehicle actively shooting at the police, and he was getting return fire. I do believe he was hit maybe more than once, but he was still alive. The police officers were tackling him on the ground when Dzhokhar, the younger brother, got into a vehicle and sped towards the police officers and his brother. Police officers struggled to get Dzhokhar out of the street, but were unable. And believe it or not, Dzhokhar ran over Tamerlan. And that's probably what killed him, the massive head and thoracic injuries. And you can see here in this picture the horrific, this is when he was pronounced dead about 1 a.m, the horrific injuries that he had. So Boston and Watertown were shut down literally. When the younger brother escaped from this shootout, they were in a panic because they knew there was explosives, maybe even more guns. They knew that Dzhokhar was a dangerous person. So on April 19th, about 6:42 in the evening, a homeowner in Watertown says, I think there's somebody in my boat in the backyard. So the police, Boston police, Watertown police, FBI, snipers, all descended on Dexter Street in Watertown. And at one point, the police started shooting almost haphazardly. And it was told, stop, stop, stop. And there was some confusion. Did Dzhokhar shoot first? What was happening? Anyways, the situation was kind of settled, and through a standoff, finally Dzhokhar appeared. And inside the boat, he wrote that these terror attacks were in response to the U.S. wars in Muslim countries. Well, who are these Tsarnaev brothers? They were born in Kyrgyzstan, which is former Soviet Union. They were of Chechen descent and came to America with their family in 2002. Tamerlan, the older brother, began seeking more radical Muslim religion, and in 2012 spent 6 months in Dagestan. His activities were of concern to the Russian government, so much so that the Russian government told the United States that they believed Tamerlan was now radicalized and is up to no good. Now, the FBI did check him out and then stopped, didn't find anything really of immediate concern. The younger brother, Dzhokhar, sold marijuana, was a terrible college student. He was now in college and was incredibly lazy, but a risk taker. So there's been a lot written. Who was the leader in this family? Was it the older brother or the younger brother? But certainly the mother was really radicalized, and her cousin really pushed for Sharia law and other really radicalized Muslim traditions, if you will, or laws. So much so that the Tsarnaev brothers' parents had the daughters fixed up in Muslim marriages that didn't work out. So in the house were 2 daughters with children. The older brother, Tamerlan, had married a United States citizen, a woman that came from a family of means, and then she became radicalized as well. And there's been a lot of speculation. How much did she know? She did have text messages right after the bombings where she texted her best friend that this was righteous, basically, and justified. No charges were ever brought to Tamerlan's wife. So Rolling Stones, if you don't remember, let me refresh your memory, because I was very disturbed, along with millions of others, decided to put a glamour shot of Dzhokhar on the cover of their summer 2013 magazine. Remember, this is the same magazine who put Charlie Manson on their cover. This is a good one to boycott. You know, they made the guy out to be a hero. In June 2015, Dzhokhar was sentenced to his death for the role in the Boston Marathon bombings. In July 2020, the death sentence was overturned. But then in 2022, the death sentence was reinstated by the Supreme Court. Now, I do have to mention that Richard Donahue, who was an MBTA officer, was critically injured during the shootout in Watertown, but he survived only to die, I believe it was in 2014, of those injuries. He was in long-term pain and really never recovered from the incident. So it was a horrifying, horrifying 5 days. The nation watched. How can these people who came to the greatest country in the world come to hate it? Well, there's all these theories, right? There's theories that Tamerlan was a boxer and the father thought, oh, he's Olympic material, which he really wasn't by all accounts, but also that he could not be in the Olympics because of not being a citizen, although he was naturalized, I believe, or had I don't understand all of it. But of course, the FBI needs to do this. They need to look to see how people right here within our borders get radicalized. So they had their job cut out for them to try to figure this out. Again, that mother was not innocent and she pushed her boys, and maybe the father too, but there's more written on the mom. But they weren't the only ones. Can you believe it? So Dzhokhar was in college. He had roommates. You would think most people were coming forward with information that would help the police, help the FBI. Instead, these college roommates stonewalled the FBI, did not tell them that Dzhokhar was in touch with them, who asked them to get together some things from his room. I forgot what else. Now, 3 of the 4, I believe, were charged with obstruction. But it always shocked me. Now, one of them may have even been deported. But this was a very serious situation. They had pressure cooker bombs. If you look this up and look at the attack on the police officers as well in Watertown, what they were throwing at these police officers obviously can kill people. And they were planning to do more in New York at Times Square. How did that happen? How are people feeling today? The psychological ramifications of seeing limbs just around you is devastating. Well, here with me today is Leo Forsakis, who was there on that day. And he's also an attorney. Welcome to the show, Leo.
Thank you for having me. How are you today?
Good. Although I am disturbed knowing tomorrow is the 12th anniversary. I spent a couple days looking through a lot of footage, and it's just really devastating. Now, you happen to be nearby on that fateful day.
I was. So just being here, looking at some of your photos and videos. It seems like yesterday. I can't believe it was 12 years ago. I was in law school. I was a student at Suffolk Law, 2L at the time. So I had I was going to Boston every day, and a beautiful city, as you know, and didn't think anything of it. But the reason why I was at the marathon is because during law school, I was representing and helping out a lot of athletes, particularly New England Patriot players, with their charities. And one specific player, his name was Eric Alexander. He was a linebacker for the Patriots. He was running the marathon for the New England Patriots Charitable Foundation. And I was going through pictures in preparation for this talk and looking back on the timeline almost exactly how you said that. We were having drinks at 12 o'clock. There was a app tracker that we could download for the Boston Marathon where we were looking at, where's Eric and how close is he to the finish line? And just by pure irony, I guess, is that he was starting to approach as these events happened. So we were close to we were at a bar at the Copley Center. They had a marathon event, and as you know, the city of Boston really celebrates this moment. The whole state has the day off. I mean, there's no work. My office, for example, will be closed the day after Easter, which is Patriots Day, this year in Massachusetts. So it's truly a day that's celebrated. So to get into the story of being there, we were tracking Eric, and when I say we, his now wife, and they've been married now for several years, Brandy and I were excited. We were encouraging him. He was doing it for a great cause, and here we are, and he's slowly starting to approach the finish line. So we had these finish line passes. So as we were walking towards the Boylston, towards the finish line, we heard the first bomb, and where I was diagonally across the second bomb. And when we heard the first bomb, it seemed like it was actually something of a celebration, a noise of a celebration. And what do I mean by that? It's Boston. We celebrate a lot of things. And Brandy and I looked at each other, his wife, and we looked at the runners, and they were continuing to run. I mean, literally, they were in the zone. When you're training months for this event, they are thinking nothing other than finishing. It's an obsession. It's your life. It's your sacrifice. And it wasn't until the second bomb happened and hit where my ears actually immediately started ringing, and we knew exactly what was going on. So yeah,
interesting,
it was,
Leo. You were saying you knew. So you knew it was terrorism, correct?
Correct. The second bomb, and Dr. Maria, you probably have you been to Abe and Louie's in Boston?
I have.
Yeah. So that's where. So there they've actually put up kind of like a lantern memorial in memory of the victims that did pass. The Martin, the young child that passed away. Isn't it scary to think that he would have been 20 years old?
I know. He was an 8-year-old little boy at the time. It's just crazy. There's such good stories have come out. There was a store owner. He owned, it was clothing, kind of athletic clothing. He didn't care. He was trying to hand out that clothes for tourniquets to help people so they wouldn't bleed to death. So a lot of people did really wonderful things on a terrible day, just instinctively. But Leo, how is it that so many people were spectators and it seems like they were orderly? I mean, even though people ran, it seemed in some ways in a chaotic scene orderly that people just started moving away and getting out of the way for first responders. What was your eyewitness account of how the crowds behaved?
That's a good question, and that's a very good observation in the way that you put it, because when I did realize what was happening, and that was with the second bomb, because my ears started ringing and I knew that wasn't normal. With the second bomb, it was literally diagonally across the street from where I was. Abe and Louie's was a little bit higher to the left, and I had just passed the Mandarin. So the immediate thing that I heard was loud screaming noises, naturally, of several females in the area. And my instinct at that time was to protect Brandy, because I also felt obligated, because I was there in support of my friend, but I also was with his girlfriend, now wife, and as a gentleman, I really thought my priority should be in protecting her. So yes, from that viewpoint, we then fled to the Mandarin Hotel. And I have shared some pictures to your production team too, from one of my viewpoints where, yes, like when we ran back, we saw blood, and we were stuck in the lobby for a little bit of time, looking out and looking at the police and seeing how people did react. And it's funny now in hindsight, when you look at those events and you look at your decision-making process, that's exactly the picture. When you look at your decision-making process in how should I go into Boston today? Is there going to be traffic? Or should I take public transportation? And should I also potentially drive in? You know what the funny thing is? I actually drove in because I thought that wouldn't be a lot of traffic, and I didn't take public transportation. And because I did do that, I was able to flee the city actually maybe as early as a couple hours after that event. But there was a very weird period in time where when the second bomb happened, it's almost like the world paused. And I knew that all the attention in the world was going to be going to where I presently was. Now, people were tremendous. In chaos, I think human nature still rises above anything else in this world. And yes, from that viewpoint from the Mandarin, there was someone that was injured and that was in the lobby. We were helping them. I took that picture just to remember the moment because I knew it was history and I knew I felt blessed to be protected by God. There was one little piece of information that I shared once more publicly, and I want to share it in your show. When I was in the lobby, I don't think it was ever publicized, but those pressure cooker bombs, they had found them in other blocks on the same street. The whole idea of what it was that these two individuals wanted to do was literally boom, 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 boom. And they kept it hush hush in that moment because they didn't want people freaking out, and they wanted to keep people safe and protected. And I think they did find them and were able to diffuse them. But I was hearing these things when I was in the lobby, and it was incredible. It was incredible. I'm still in awe of thinking of it, and I feel blessed to be able to come away from it. But yeah, when we were looking out that window in that picture, there was an unfortunate amount of people that were, yes, that picture exactly, where they acted quickly and they were able to save lives, but there were a lot of people that were injured from the unfortunate circumstance of just trying to be there to support friends, family, loved ones. So what eventually happened for us is I had an opportunity to call my family and say, hey, you're going to see that a really bad thing happened in Boston. I'm just letting you know that I'm okay. My friend who I'm with is okay. We had no idea if our friend, my friend Eric, was safe, who was running. Shortly after that little window of calling, all phone lines were like dead. Like cell phones were not working. It wasn't until maybe 7 o'clock 8 o'clock at night where we were reunited back at his condo. He wasn't able to have his cell phone, his personal items for days after that event, that I knew he was safe. And later on that night, and a lot of other people that we knew that were running to even know who was okay and who wasn't okay.
Yeah, the police department did a great job of collecting cell phones. And if people got home with their cell phones, they were calling the police if they had pictures. It was a great response. I can't say enough for the police department, the first responders, everyday American citizens. There was a lot of love that came into Boston, and a phrase was coined, Boston strong. Even our rivals, the New York Yankees, I believe it was the very next day, played a game. And in Yankee Stadium, they played our song that we play, Neil Diamond's song, Sweet Caroline. They sang it in solidarity with the people of Boston. So I thought that was beautiful. And I know, Leo, you will remember Big Papi saying this.
For sure.
All right. All right, Boston. This jersey that we wear today, it doesn't say Red Sox. It says Boston. We want to thank you, Mayor Menino, Governor Patrick, the whole police department for the great job that they did this past week. This is our city. And nobody gonna dictate our freedom. Stay strong. Thank you.
You know, he may not be the world's greatest orator, but that still gives me chills. The strength in which he said, this is our city and nobody's going to dictate our freedom. Well, thank you for joining me, Leo. I wish you the best.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and Boston strong always.
Amen. Well, I am going to take a short break, and when I come back, I'm going to have Basil Baz, an ex-CIA officer who actually trained for a bombing to occur at the marathon. Stay with me.
Here we are, pretty much at the beginning of the process here at this pristine, I call it a laboratory. It's not like a factory, it's like a hospital. This is the beginning of the process for roasting. Deep green, very good quality. Most people don't use this quality. We deal with small farmers because they like to know who we're dealing with. They give us the highest quality, all organic, non-GMO. You should know all Arabica beans, no Robusto, all Arabica. They're gonna go into the roaster and it'll get roasted for about 20 minutes or so. Oh my goodness, look at these. My goodness. You're going to want to specially order these. This is what goes into Rudy's coffee.
Are you looking for monthly income without the risk of stocks? Here's something you won't hear on CNBC. There's actually a unique way to collect royalties directly from America's most productive oil fields. No exploring, drilling, or operational headaches. You simply collect checks month after month. The best part? You can get started with just $25 through any brokerage account. The Oxford Club's chief income strategist, Mark Lichtenfeld, breaks down what he believes is the #1 oil royalty play for 2025. Visit mariaoilboom.com now to learn more. That's right, mariaoilboom.com. Stop buying oil stocks and start collecting oil royalty checks instead. Welcome back. With me is Basil Baz, a ex-CIA Special Operations Officer, also a Citadel graduate, and he was a recipient of the Intelligence Commendation Medal, and also an officer in the Marine Corps. Welcome, Basil.
Thank you, Maria. Thanks for having me.
You certainly have a lot of accommodations. I didn't even get to all of them, but I thank you for taking the time. So Basil, as I was re-looking at this, because I was in the area, I'm from New Hampshire when this bombing occurred. I had several employees running in the marathon. But when you look back after all this time, you forget certain information. And as I was re-looking at all of this, Russia was concerned about the older brother, Tamerlan Zarnev, and actually warned the United States. And they did what they could, I guess. The FBI kind of looked around, maybe even questioned him, but nothing stood out, so had to move on. I don't know how to change that. Is there any recommendations you have about when someone's on our radar, especially when another country says, hey, he's been in this area that is known for radicalization and you better watch out? What should we do with that information?
Yeah, Maria, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. It's interesting is no matter what you're tasked to do, whether it's to look out for something, unless you know what to look out for, unless you have a very good understanding of what the capabilities are from the threat, you'll overlook certain things. So, for example, during this period of time, there was this myth, so to speak, or a type of thinking in the federal government and with a lot of three-letter agencies that in order for a terrorist attack to occur, it would have to be done by some jihadist or someone that was well trained over many, many months on how to actually perform the attack, how to make the bomb, how like 9/11, how to fly the airplane, or whatever it may be. And this type of mindset permeated not only the military, but the CIA, the FBI, a lot of organizations. So about 2 years prior to that, about 2 years prior to that, I had been contracted by a company out of Los Angeles to speak with certain members of the federal government regarding this issue. How do we get you to think differently? And how do we get you to think outside the box? And there was quite a bit of resistance because, as you know, in bureaucracy and with a lot of people that have been in three-letter agencies for a long time, they kind of get stuck in their ways. And they only know what they know. And they're not willing to look outside the box. So this company hired me to come in as a consultant and create a program that included half government workers and half what we call creative thinkers, people that, were in the entertainment industry and thought outside the box, kind of like your wildest dreams, what could happen? And they kind of lived off of this motto of don't think it can't and don't be surprised if it does. So we wanted to put them together so we could get a real good mixture of people that would help us with this program. And so my job was to show the federal side of the house and of course the creative side of the house that all it took was someone like myself to train people for 3 days to pull off an attack. So what we did with the permission of the federal government, it was a type of red cell operation where we would put them in a room and I would have them literally with open source intelligence, show me that they had the ability to make an explosive and then go out within a city and actually purchase the items that you would need to make an explosive. In this case, it was what we called IBPEs, improvised backpack explosives. And then we would have them turn all of those items back in and get their copy of the receipt to prove to me that they could actually purchase those things. Then they would come back to the classroom and show me how they were going to assemble all this stuff. And then they would be given a target. And the objective was on the third day was to actually go out and take the simulated backpack explosive and put it someplace. And then let's say it was simulating that it was going to detonate at 1300 hours in the middle of the day. And if that time came and no one discovered the backpack, then the mission was successful. And we did this with just normal people in 3 days. During the first 2 years, I believe that we actually targeted 12 cities, and we were successful in all 12 cities. Now, it's interesting when it comes to Boston, because when this incident actually happened, we were thrown for a little loop. It's like, whoa, what just took place? Because when we did that exercise in Boston, the federal government and the federal people that were there were supposed to take that information, that this is a possibility, this can be a capability, and that was supposed to filter down to local police so that they would be aware that this can happen in your city.
Oh, interesting.
So, yeah, so two things either occurred. One, either on the federal side of the house, it never got to local police, or it got to local police and they never acted on it. And so when this bombing, this backpack bombing happened during the marathon, and in our exercise, it was just a lot of different places. You know, it was train stations, it was restaurants, it was you know, all over the country, of course. But you know, we never really, I think when we were doing the exercise, we never really thought about the Boston Marathon. But nevertheless, that's exactly what happened. So in my mind, I sat back and we thought, wait a minute, were they not looking for that? What's the oversight? Were they not trained to look for that? And I don't know what the answer is, but sadly, it did occur. And that, I think, that literally altered the thinking of a lot of people in those three-letter agencies after that. And I remember because people called me up and said, "Oh my gosh, you were right. This didn't take, you know, a jihadist in a training camp for 3 months to do this. I mean, this was done pretty easily." So that was our experience there. And
so,
and again,
Basil, let me ask you a question, because I always seek to learn, especially from experts, and you certainly are an expert. What does open source mean?
If you were to get if you were to get on your computer, all the information that you can pull up on Google and that's open source. It's not. It's not being held secret. It's not like the dark web. And so it just means whatever's out there for you to grab, that's what we call open source. Facebook, all of those things. If you wanted to collect information, open source information, let's say on my life or your life, someone would look at our Facebook, they would look at our Instagram, and whatever information we provided them on those sites, they would collect, and that would be open source intelligence. Okay. And trust me, a lot of people put a lot about their life on those things, which they probably shouldn't.
Yes, but you were ahead of your time at the time, because Tamerlan had learned about these pressure cooker bombs online, open source. He learned it very easily. I still don't understand all the mechanisms of it. I know they put in nails and everything, but is it on a timer? How does these pressure? I probably shouldn't ask too many questions because we don't want lunatic, right? So I'll retract that question and talk about the radicalization of everyday Americans. Now, these two brothers did have a background, a Chechen background. The mom had a cousin who definitely believed in Sharia law and the caliphate and all that. But an everyday white toast American, we know there's some people being radicalized, even women. Online, they're being attracted to these, Al Qaeda, ISIS. They're flying over. They're giving money. So you are so right. It doesn't have to be a person that looks like, the 9/11 hijackers. It could be somebody or persons, groups that look like you and me.
Yeah. Anytime we have people in any country that are disenchanted with their life or their government or whatever it may be, sometimes they are manipulated by many different people and many different things. Sometimes it can be money, it can be ideology, it can be a lot of different things that somehow they think that this will fix the problem or it will help them seek the revenge they're looking for or whatever it may be. And so what we have to do is provide better security. So example, I know for a fact, and there are the three-letter agencies, many of them, who are responsible for vetting and market and targeting potential threats are overwhelmed. So, for example, during the Biden administration, you keep hearing that that we have terrorists in the country that came through? Well, we absolutely do. I mean, I've been parts of many of those discussions. And so people would come across, and, it was catch and release, and they all of a sudden would reach out to certain three-letter agencies and say, hey, can you tell us about, I don't know, somebody. I'll just make up a name, Juan, okay? And they would go, no, Juan looks clear. And then Juan would come in the United States, and then like 3 days later, they realized they messed up. And it was like, oh my gosh, Juan was a terrorist. So what happens is some of these organizations that are responsible for just doing that, with that vetting process, during the Biden administration, what he would do is he would overwhelm them with other assignments and not fund them. So they couldn't really do their job. Now, I don't know if that was intentional or not. I like to kind of think that everything Biden and Harris and the Democratic Party did was by design. I'm not a Republican nor Democrat. I'm just a patriot. But, the Democratic Party certainly showed where their loyalties were during the Biden administration. And so it would not surprise me that if Biden didn't want the vetting process to be clean, he would do exactly that. He would go to the three-letter agencies and go, hey, I want you to do this new assignment, and not give them money to do the new assignment. And that means all the vetting and stuff would just kind of fall by the wayside. So that system's not quite broken, but I know that they're playing catch up even to this day to find out who's where and what's going to happen. So in our country now, without being too alarming, I think most of the people who are counterterrorism experts, and I don't even know if I'm an expert. People call me that all the time. I was just a counterterrorism officer. I just know a little bit about it, enough to get me in trouble probably. But I just know that it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. The Biden administration left this floodgate open, and most of the really good, and I think I can speak for Tom Homan, the border czar, and a lot of people that we know, and they're all thinking pretty much the same thing. We've got something in the country that we've got to find and stop from happening. And the gates are open, and God help us to find that in time so that we don't get an incident occurring in the United States.
I'm just a normal American citizen, and prior to this show, I had a radio show, and I talked a lot about the Biden administration and the southern border, and I keep talking about how there are cells within the country. I have no proof. I'm just an everyday citizen, and to hear you, and you are an expert, saying that, it really scares the bejesus out of me, because I don't know if we're equipped. I don't know if some of the agents have skills anymore, because you're right. They were diverted to follow or to intimidate conservatives or people who went to Latin Mass or Catholics in general, DEI projects. And I am really worried for my nation. But thinking about that, and you've done training before, although some of your skills are probably instinctual, you were born with them. What kind of training should we be doing with our law enforcement today to look for these cells, to look for these people who may be radicalized?
Wow, that's another great question. I'll give you an example of something happened in another state, and I won't embarrass that police department. We were training them, and some of their younger officers kind of scoffed at the fact that, and actually said, we don't have MS-13, and we don't have trafficking, and we don't have this, and we don't have this. And I knew just the opposite. So I asked their chief, who was a great guy, to step into the classroom. And I said, Chief, I said, let me ask you a question. I said, you know that MS-13 is here, and you know there are terrorists in the United States, right? And he goes, yeah, absolutely. I said, I don't know what part of that formula your guys aren't getting. I said, but just let me ask you a simple question. I said, what kind of weapons do you carry? And he said, well, we carry our sidearm, and we carry some CAR-15s. And I said, do you carry RPGs? Do you have Claymore mines? Do you have C4? I said, do you have a 50 cal at your department? And he just shook his head and said, no. And I said, let me tell you something. Those guys do. and they can access that because we can't clean up the black arms market, or the gray arms market. And that's where the same logistical mechanism that fentanyl and child trafficking comes through and weapons come through, and possibly nuclear weapons come through. We haven't got a handle on that. We do a really good job of it, but we don't have a handle on it. And then with the onslaught at the border, it just made things a lot worse. So I think one of the things that 47 is doing, which is great, and I don't really care what the liberal left thinks about this, because they don't really care about the security of this country. I don't know
They
what
prove
they're
that.
voting, to be honest with you. And there was a time where I was a little more conservative about that and said, well, I'm not going to say anything. That's long gone.
I
They've
did
proven
that as
themselves.
well. Yeah.
It's like, I don't really care what you think. I know what's right and I know what's wrong. But when 47 says, look, get rid of the DEI stuff because people need to be hired on merit, that's what we have to do. Because if you want good agents in the field, then they've got to prove themselves. They've got to prove that they can go up against the worst of the bad actors out there, whether that's the cartel, MS-13, the mafia, whatever it may be, whatever the threat is, whatever the global, whatever the domestic threat is, these are the type of agents we have to have. And I think now that some of the agencies are being cleaned up, and it's going to take a little while because 47 is not only got to clean up all the bad actors, but it's got to run government too. And here I am, like I'm speaking for the president, of course, and I'm not, but I think it's common sense, what his workload looks like. I think what's going to happen is you're going to start seeing a lot of people step up to the plate, a lot of former veterans saying, hey, you know what? I wasn't going to join the FBI because it was full of a bunch of woke buttheads. I'm not going to join the organization because it's all DEI. But now it's being cleaned up. They're going, there's a place for me, a guy like me who can get the job done, who wants to love the Constitution, who wants to protect America. I can do that job. Hire me. And I think we're going to see house get cleaned, but I think the vacuum is going to get filled with a lot of really, really good professionals from here on out. It's going to take a little while, but I don't think patriots and mostly good war fighters are going to put up with what we put up with the Biden administration anymore. They've got the support of 47. They've got the support of guys like General Mike Flynn and the transition team and a lot of good people that have got their six covered. And so they can step forward without being afraid that, if I say something that I can get arrested for, and it's my Second Amendment right or my First Amendment right, I'm covered now. I have good cover. So I think that's what we're going to see.
Well, that's really encouraging. You have a great name, by the way, Basil Baz. That's a wonderful name. It's almost a baseball name.
That's funny. Yeah.
I really enjoyed
it. In second grade, you don't get to pick your name, but in the second grade, it was a little embarrassing for me because I had such an odd name. I remember coming home and I was a little down. My father, who's a special forces guy, great guy. I come from a great family, great sister, great mom and dad, great wife. I mean, it's great, and I'm very blessed. I've been very fortunate, and my dad sat me down and he gave me the lineage, the history of our family and the name and where it came from. And at the end of about an hour of the storytelling, I was like, wow, I'm proud to have this name. It's a little odd, but it'll serve me well later. And ironically, it has served me pretty well. Most people are like, did you make that name up? It's like, I couldn't even make that name up. What are you talking about? So,
well, I've really enjoyed having you on the show, and I hope you come back again.
Thank you, Dr. Maria. I really appreciate it. God bless you guys. Thanks for having me, and have a wonderful day, okay?
Thank you.
All right.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's show. Very serious subjects, as they always are. But it was just tomorrow will mark the 12th anniversary of the Boston Marathon bombers. And I have to say, God bless all of you, the police department, the FBI, the people who ran to help. And I know the victims are still suffering psychologically, physically. I hope your pain will ease, both mentally and spiritually and physically. But no, we are with you, and we are all in times of trouble. We are all Americans, and no matter where you are in the country, we'll support you, as we did to the New Yorkers on 9/11 and the people in Washington, the Pentagon on 9/11. We are Boston strong. Thank you, and I will see you on Wednesday night.